So, hello everyone. Today I will talk about NixOS for beginners. So that's the right place to learn what it is and why you would want to use NixOS and why you wouldn't use it. So we will start right now to get into the topic. So what is it? It's a Linux distribution, which means it uses the Linux kernel and it comes with all the userland that will provide anything you need to have a working computer, like a boot system, a shell, and a graphical display, and everything that doesn't come from the kernel. It's based on Nix. It's a package manager that is advertised as purely functional. It's quite different than the regular package manager we used to have, and we will see later why it's different and how. NixOS is free. You don't have to pay for it. And it's also open source. So it's using the MIT license. You can redistribute it, make change, and maybe if you need to make a commercial product with it, I think you have some rights to do this without redistributing change, but you really have to check the license. NixOS also have a new release every 6 months. So this is quite usual nowadays. Most Linux systems and distribution will just provide a new version every 6 months. But NixOS doesn't have a long-term support version like Ubuntu does. Only the last 2 releases are support. So you still have security fix and some package updates for the last 2 releases. But for the last release, it's quite okay. For the previous release, so the second old one, it seems to be more best effort fixes and very important updates with regard to security. Maybe not bleeding edge software in this one. And also important fact, this is not a company product. This is made by the community. And there is a NixOS Foundation, which is a Dutch legal entity that helps promoting and founding some events for NixOS, but it's all community driven. There is nothing to sell, it's not a product. And as far as I know, no company are providing services for it and support. If you need some specific change, I don't think you can easily find a company to help you there. Now, we will seek for why you would use NixOS, and I will state some good, not so good. I don't want to tell them they are bad, they're just not so good. And some facts that you may have a different opinion, they are good or bad, it's up to you. The good. Because it uses Nix, you have transactional updates, meaning you are using your system, you upgrade it to the next release, let's say. It's the biggest change you could have in your system lifetime. And you won't have any trouble to continue to run your current system. The upgrade will be done in a separate environment than what you run to make it easy to explain. All your current binaries won't be replaced by a new version. once the new version is ready, you can switch to that new version, but you can just stay to your current version. And it's really useful to avoid downtime or weird behavior, because most of the time on non-NixOS Linux distribution, when you upgrade, you will have your binaries replaced by a new version, but then half of your system is currently being the new version and the other half is the older version. And you start having troubles and weird behavior. So this doesn't happen with Nix. And if you have to shut down the upgrade process, maybe because you are running out of battery or something like this, there is no issue because of this. Your system is still available, and you can just resume the update process, and it will continue from where it was, and it just works. The other fact is NixOS is easy to manage. You have mostly a configuration file in which you describe your system. Like, I want Pulse Audio to run, I want the X server to run, and I have 2 users. Here are their name, they are in which group, and this one has Docker, and the other doesn't have it. And then you just run a command, and your system is now exactly as you describe it in the configuration file. So you don't have to learn everything on Linux. You don't have to edit files and avoid making mistakes and following guides explaining how to modify this HTTPD config file to add the virtual host. You all go through NixOS modules written by the community, and you are reusing it in your configuration file. The last good fact is it's reproducible. So if you are using an old computer, let's say, and you need to move to a new one, you don't have to remember every small changes you made to your system to have your current system to work the way it works. You just have to take your configuration file and copy to the new computer and just rebuild the system with that file. And you will have an exact same environment. Also, this also helps when you want to share a piece of configuration with someone. Like, you need to help someone setting up maybe a database, and you can try it on your computer and just share that piece of code that you will add a database support to your friend. They can reuse it, and it will work for them if it worked for you. So this is very convenient. Also, when you need to help someone who has a bug, most of the time you should be able to reproduce it if it's a real bug in NixOS or in a module. But then it depends really if you can reproduce that bug. But it gives a framework to easily have the same environment as one other user, which is very convenient. Now we will speak about the not so good facts. So NixOS has a really important steep learning curve. You have many new concepts that doesn't exist in other Linux distribution. We will see some of them later. So if you use NixOS, you won't have to discover them one by mistake. We'll also your common Linux knowledge you may have with Ubuntu or Debian, Fedora, or anything else won't certainly apply on NixOS. I will explain this later in the next step. And it's really a whole new world to learn. It's not just another Linux, it's something very different. It's based on Linux, but I really think you should deal with it as something entirely different, and don't try to make your Linux knowledge to apply on it and give up because it doesn't work. It's something different. It has different ways. You may like or not. One not so good point is if you download some Linux binaries from the internet, which can happen if you download some programs that are not in the package library, or if you download video games or stuff like that. Because of the Nix package manager and the way NixOS work, all the shared libraries and stuff required for binaries to run won't be found by this binary on NixOS. And while we can still make them run with some patching on top of it, it's not very convenient, and sometimes it can be very disturbing and annoying. Another point is there is a lot of documentation for NixOS. You have the NixOS manual that is kept up to date for every release. You have many things in it. But when you start, you don't really know exactly what you want to look in the documentation and what you need. And if you start reading it from top to bottom, it's very long and not very interesting and too much information. So I hope after this session, you will have a better overview of what you need if you want to use NixOS. Finally, the facts for which your opinion may vary about it. You can't use, let's say, a quick and dirty hack on your system to try something. So if you want to, let's say, modify your /etc/host file to try your local server with a domain name, you can't just edit the file with your editor because it will be read-only. And you need to go in your configuration file, find which option allows you to make change to this file, and then rebuild your system with this option and its new value. And now your etc host file has the value you want. So this is good because you don't end up with a system that was modified for a quick hack and was forgotten later in the orchestration tool used to push config and new files. But on the other hand, when you need to make such a change for 1 minute just to test something, it becomes a bit more complicated because you need to mostly override a package to include a patch or override an attribute of the package definition. And it's not always as easy as just opening a file and editing it as root. So I can't say it's good or bad. That's your opinion. And another is most NixOS users I've met don't want to go back to something else after using NixOS because it's so painless. It just works and you can easily recover from mistakes and you have mostly everything you need. So if you try NixOS, maybe you won't want to use your old system you still liked, but it doesn't have the same vibe. So it's still a fact that must be taken in account. Now I will talk about some concepts in NixOS that may be very disturbing at first. And the first one is a nix-env command. It's often advertised as the way to install or search packages in the command line. You can install like Firefox from your user without having to be root. Or you can search what's the name of the package providing LaTeX. It really works like anything traditional like apt or yum for Fedora. But please don't use it. It defeats NixOS declaration style. It mostly exists because it's old with regard to NixOS. And it's useful, but just for people using Nix on non-NixOS system, because these people don't have a system-wide configuration file, and nix-env is maybe the most convenient way for them to install packages. But in NixOS, you have better mechanism. And nix-env install package can get out of sync compared to the system, and this will give you bad results. So there are currently no alternative to this, but as you don't really need it, you can just declare your package in your configuration file. Please avoid using nix-env, and you will save you a lot of trouble. The second concept is a very long path to the bash binary. This is what packaged program paths look like. So if you had the habit of looking for file in a standard hierarchy file system, let's say in /usr/bin to look for binaries, this doesn't exist on NixOS. Everything installed is under the Nix store, whose location is /nix/store. And then you have a string that looks like quite random, but it's just a hash of all the inputs used to build the package. So if you rebuild this package with all the same input, like every dependency is used to build it, option, anything that could define the package, you would have the same definition, the same hash, and you wouldn't have to rebuild it. And it guarantees you, if you use this version, this was built with this option. And everything in NixOS is built this way because of Nix. And you have to learn about this. You can't use anymore as the first line in your script the full path to bash, because it doesn't work. So you have to use /usr/bin/env and then call something that would be in your path variable. This could be really disturbing at first. Just not the script thing, but having everything in the store not mixed together. But this is what provide transactional updates, rollbacks, and everything you could want that make NixOS so unique. The other concept is Nix shell. So it's a bit specific because it doesn't have alternative in other system. It's specific to Nix. which comes with NixOS, of course. And with Nix shell, you can pass it a package name as an argument, and it will download the package and give you a new shell in your command line, but with that package installed. So let's say I run Nix shell with GCC as a parameter. I don't have GCC installed for all my other terminal I would open, but in the one with Nix shell, I have GCC installed. I can run it. In my environment variables, I will have all the stuff required to find headers, libraries for the linker. And GCC won't be installed persistently. This means, to the next point, everything download for NixOS by Nix, and that is in the Nix store, is hooked to some version of your environment, and this takes some disk space. And when you run a Nix shell, GCC will be downloaded into that store, but it won't be hooked into any environment. And when you need to make some cleaning in this store sometimes, and you will need Nix collect garbage command, and it will look for anything that isn't declared in your configuration file and remove it from the disk. And you can even go a bit further and ask for removing older version of your system. And you need to run this on a regular basis, because if you don't, you will just fill your disk rather quickly. And this is a common issue for newcomers to NixOS. So you have to keep in mind, you need to run that garbage collector. You can schedule a systemd timer for running it every day or every week or something, but you need to run it. And last concept is NixOS rebuild command. So when you make change to your system-wide configuration file, you will have to use that command to build the new system with all the stuff you asked in it. And then a new boot entry on your computer will be created that would let you use that new version of the system. But you could just also switch directly to it right now and apply all of the modification on the fly, which partially works because if you had some services, you may lack a group in your user, or if you change a kernel version, you would still have to reboot to have the whole version, let's say. And despite this name rebuild, you don't really compile anything except if you need some version of a package that doesn't exist in the official cache repository. So and it isn't really long, because I've been speaking about NixOS with friends recently, and when I talked about NixOS rebuild, people were thinking I had to rebuild everything like on Gen 2, and it would be very long and draw a lot of electricity and network. But it just grabs the package required for your configuration to exist. And most of the time, it won't build anything, won't compile anything. It's just creating links and downloading package. Now, I will give you a few tips if you want to use NixOS. I hope that will give you some insight for NixOS and save you a lot of time. So there is one file you need to edit. It's /etc/nixos/configuration.nix. This file exists by default. When you install, you have that file. And when you start with NixOS, you don't need anything else to modify. So just make changes in it and run NixOS rebuild. It's mostly exactly what you need to play with your system and add a package, service, users. You have a main page for this file, which is configuration.nix. That's the name of the main page. It's automatically generated from the package definition and NixOS module. So it's always up to date because the documentation is updated as long with the code itself. It's the same file. And it's easy to run grep or manipulate that content in the terminal if you want to refer to it sometimes. There is a website, search.nixos.org, in which you can search for packages or system option. So it's quite useful if we want a package, but it has a unusual name, or maybe it has a different name than its project name. Like maybe Apache web server maybe is called Apache-HTTPD or HTTPD or Apache. So you can use this website to search for Apache, and you should have the package name there and how to install it if you want. There is a setting that can save you a lot of disk space in the Nix store. It's nix.settings.auto-optimize-store, and you set it to true for enabling it. Basically, when you manipulate your Nix store, it will look for identical files across your different packages version. And if two files are the same, they are replaced by a hard link. So a hard link is when you have a single file that exists at multiple places in your file system. So it takes the disk runs. So instead of having a file in 4 times, you have one file with 4 hard links, and it will save the space 3 times. And when you apply this on your whole system, you easily save a few dozen of gigabytes. So it's not enabled by default. It's a huge win for disk space. Another tip is using Nix index, which provide Nix locate. It's useful when you need a binary or a file, but you really don't know the package name that provided it. So you can use nix-locate bin/telnet, and it will give you a list of packages that provide something ending with bin/telnet. It's very convenient. You have alternative to this in Fedora. You have yum provide. In Debian, you have to install apt cache, apt file. So Nix index is the equivalent of these other tools. One tip, very important, is don't learn Nix. Nix is a language used by the Nix package manager. You will quickly, I think, understand the basics of Nix syntax for your configuration file, because you just have to follow the documentation and give a value, but you don't really need to know about Nix. You can learn it later if you want. This can be useful for defining new packages or overriding stuff in current packages. But I think that would be a mistake to start getting with Nix along with NixOS, because you have two huge pieces to learn at once. It can be too much. And learning Nix without understanding NixOS may not help you in anything. And the last tip is there is a discourse forum for NixOS, and the NixOS community is very friendly. I think it's the friendliest project I ever seen yet. So really, if you have an issue, you can just ask for help there, and you will have many answers. Most of the time, very good quality answer. And you can also search for if someone already asked your question. So most of the time, you will already find a question with an answer, and you don't have to ask yourself. It's question time. So please, could you just write the question? I will read them and ask, reply if I know. No question?
Oh, I have a question. Can I just kind of too long to write down in the chat. So like the way I use Nix right now, I'm in Ubuntu and I use the Nix shell for things. And then I don't know, every couple of months or so, I'll get too much stuff in the Nix store and eventually I need to garbage collect. And then when I go back into my Nix shell, it pulls down the whole universe again and takes forever to build. So if you have to run Nix garbage collect more often in NixOS, how do you get around that? Do you just like, you know, every week after you garbage collect, your Nix shells take forever to build again?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when you pull package from Nix shell, they are download, but when you run the garbage collector, they are removed because they are not used actively in your system. I don't have a good answer here, I think. I personally run a local cache for packages because I have multiple computers using NixOS, and this saves me a lot of bandwidth. I don't have this issue anymore with Nix shell because it will be in the cache server. So I still have to download them, but in local, it's a lot faster. Maybe there is a way to pin the package from that Nix shell to tell I don't want to garbage collect them, but that would be interesting to know if you can.
Yeah, so maybe I can
please
talk a bit about this. I'm gonna link it. It's NixDRenv, which kind of takes care of this automatically. So, well, you have to use DRenv for it, but that's already very convenient. And NixDRenv kind of makes it better in that it does create kind of GC routes, garbage collection routes, which prevent the collection of the shells packages. And from my experience, it worked pretty well. There is some problems in Nix itself, which means like things like IFD, import from derivation. Like it's a bit complicated, but garbage collection collects too much. So you might still end up downloading some things. But at least the NixDRenv way of GC routing things helps a bit.
Cool.
And this is,
okay.
And I think the problem is the same on NixOS and other operating systems plus Nix. Like in both cases, you can end up with a store which just takes up too much space. You can run the optimized store on NixOS and non-NixOS. And yeah, garbage collection as well.
Okay, thanks, Sylvain, for your input. I hope, Tanya, you had some material that could help you.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it. I mean, I get in theory the idea of a garbage collection route, but I don't know what to do with it. That's the problem.
Yeah, garbage collection routes are really not something as an end user should have to deal with. They are mostly created transparently by Nix. So right, garbage collection in general, you need kind of a root object you reference other things from, and that as long as that root object stays around, the other things it depends on don't get collected. And Nix uses this for many things. So if you install a package with NixOS, it creates like a GC root for your system, so that all the things your system depends on don't get collected. When you delete a generation from your systems, it deletes the GC root, and then does a garbage collection, so everything that's not needed gets collected. But also something really cool, I think, is how when you run a Nix shell, it adds, I think the shell process as kind of a GC root, so that as long as this shell keeps running, it won't collect the packages you have in there. But yeah, if you exit the Nix shell, the process goes away, the GC root goes away. Unless you use NixDRenv, which keeps them around in another place as well.
Okay, so it sounds like the simplest hack to get around that is have my Nix shell that I need open while I run the garbage collection.
I think that would actually work. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, but when you have 10 projects with Nix shell, it's not very convenient.
Yeah, it's not that great, but okay, small hack. Yeah, I will look into this DRN.
I thought DRenv was just to get into a Nix shell when you cd into a directory. So if it's doing a bit more practical. We had a question from Mohammed. They ask, when I said NixOS doesn't break current binaries when updating, is that why we have /run/current system, and when we update, it becomes /run/current system, and the old one is deleted or renamed? Oh, yes, basically, NixOS use a lot of symbolic links. Your whole environment is built with symbolic links to everything that creates your profile. And when you switch to a new version or a different version, all the sim links will be recreated to that version of things you built. And this is why it has limitation, like if your user received a new group, you don't have it until you log out and log in again. If you change a kernel, you need to reboot to get that new kernel because you can't do this live. And basically, NixOS just work with a lot of symbolic links for the different version.
And so
go ahead.
I just wanted to say that the run current system is kind of, it points to a Nixstore directory. And when you do a NixOS rebuild, it kind of builds a new Nixstore directory kind of to be put in as run current system. And when you do the switch to the actual system, it really just updates that symlink to point to the new Nixstore location. more or less. And so that's kind of where the kind of immediate switching of your system comes from, the kind of transactional property, because it just does like a ln-s, like a symlink change. But the whole updating then, so like there's restarting systemd services, for example, that still needs to happen, and that's not as transactional, but the kind of changing all your binaries happens in like an atomic operation, the changing the symlink.
Someone was about to speak.
Yes. My question was, does the symlink heaviness incur, a performance overhead? I mean, can you notice it day to day compared to a normal Linux distribution?
I never run a benchmark for this, but I don't think it has a huge performance impact. This may affect a bit the startup time for programs, but I think this is rather not significant. However, in Nix, you may have multi-version of libraries with various options. This can hurt a bit the startup time and memory usage, because if you run Firefox and Chromium, maybe they may load different versions of shared library. And while on traditional system, you would have only one shared library that would be really shared across all your programs. And so maybe you could have the libSSL a few times load into your memory, but it's still not very significant for load time or memory usage.
Generally, having multiple shared libraries of different versions should only happen when you like explicitly request it. Like when you install a Firefox from like 2 years ago and a Chromium from now, then they have been built with different versions and you get the 2 different versions from them. But assuming you kind of build on a current Nix packages version, you generally really only get a single version of the libraries. So it's not a big concern. Yeah. And the symlinking thing, I don't think there might actually be no performance penalty to that because of how maybe Linux does some internal caching, so that a lot of things might be kept in memory all the time. Not sure about that, but I haven't noticed any performance problems because of the symlink.
There is indeed a cache for this kind of metadata, but as I said, it's mostly a startup time because you need to fill the cache before being able to using it. But it's really not significant. A symlink attribute is exactly like a permission in the file system. So usually you have to load all your other permission and you will have directly the symlink with them. So it's filling the cache rather quickly. And you just have to open a new file. So it's really not very big here.
I guess if you have a really slow disk, it might be significant.
Yes, maybe.
And also depending on like how big your system is, probably.
I think one performance penalty could be from the Nix store having everything under a single directory instead of splitting all the derivation under some tree like it's done with cache or in Git. Git uses the 2 first character from the hash of a file to split into different directory. And this reduces seek time when you request what file are in /nix/store. And the file system has a lot of stuff to find and return when you need that information. So maybe this can hurt a bit, but still with caching, I'm not sure this is significant.
I see, thank you. And I guess my second question was, you talked earlier about running random binaries from the internet.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if something like I think it's called build FHS user environment. It creates an isolated directory in the Nix store where everything is under /user bin /user lib or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if that's useful for times where you don't want to write a derivation. Like, have you ever used this before?
Yeah, the FSH feature allow you to create an environment with a traditional file system and binaries at the location that most users would expect to be. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. It's complicated, and that's why I didn't say that it doesn't work, but it can be complicated. There is a command mostly used for video games. It's called Steam Run. It's a package that creates FSH environment with many libraries and packages in it in order to play video games. This can be used to run some software you download on the internet. I think also app image programs are using FSH built in into their package. But I think this is very case by case stuff.
I see. Thank you.
The NixOS user wiki is also very useful for general help, and I found this good article there about packaging external binaries, which goes into some techniques for how they can be made to work. Yeah, that would be interesting for this.
We have a question from Noon. What things don't work well? From my experience, I'm happy with NixOS and it works. So I don't think I have something that doesn't work well. However, I'm not using NixOS on remote servers and with critical services on it. And maybe this is an area in which we lack tooling and documentation and processes, because there is something called NixOS to manage remote servers, but from a few people I talked about it, they don't really enjoy NixOS or similar tools. So maybe this is an area where NixOS doesn't perform very well. If we have someone, yeah.
I think NixOS is very good for servers, like especially good, even since you do have like reproducible servers, and you can upgrade them in a way that usually doesn't break them. And NixOS is just one of many tools to deploy NixOS machines. There are probably like a dozen tools which do that by now, and each of them have different cool things that work for them. So I personally think NixOS is fairly good for this.
Okay.
I guess all I mean is like one thing I just learned just this moment from that link you posted. So probably you said it as well, Solène. It's just like I can't download arbitrary programs and run them. That seems
this can be an issue.
Frustrating. But that doesn't bother. That doesn't bother. Like no, that doesn't bother you.
Hopefully, I have most of the programs I need that comes from Nix packages, so I don't really have that issue. For some other programs, you have Flatpak support if you want to install stuff from Flatpak, which are very reliable. That can help sometimes. But yes, if you really need something that doesn't work on NixOS, this can be very frustrating, and you may need a virtual machine or a Docker environment if it's command line. But
I would add, though, that I was using Arch Linux prior to NixOS, and it was also the case that you couldn't download a binary and expect it to run because it would have different versions of shared libraries and so on.
Yeah, and that's where you'd probably in NixOS to do it properly, you'd like package the binary and like give it the explicit paths from Nix, and then that would make it reproducible for everybody in the future that wants to install this random binary.
I guess all I mean is like, for example, I think that Obsidian app possibly is a binary that I downloaded, for example. And like maybe the answer will be someone's just put that on Nix packages. And it's like, but I guess what I don't quite understand is philosophically, like, do the Nix, like it seems like the Nix community is like, it's like if it doesn't exist on Nix packages, it doesn't exist. You know, it's like step one is get everything on Nix packages. Step two is then live life. And does that just work just because enough people are doing it? Or is that a misunderstanding?
That sounds pretty accurate to me. Like it's just a lot of people are working on Nix packages, and that's where everybody puts everything. And yeah, that's why Nix packages gets a lot of maintenance and fixes for everything and security updates. Well, yeah, sounds pretty accurate.
We are running out of time, and we have two questions. Mohamed is asking if there are advantages for running derenv on NixOS compared to another Linux distribution like Ubuntu. So I don't think it just provides the same feature for Nix. So it should be exactly the same use for NixOS or Ubuntu when you use derenv.
There is one thing which I think could be different, and that's that on other distributions, you do have these shared library paths in like /user/lib and so on. So if your Nix shell uses some impure non-Nixified tools that might still try to access these shared libraries, they might work on Ubuntu, like that derenv shell. Whereas on NixOS, it would fail because the paths don't exist.
Of course. But can you tell derenv you need a pure shell? When we say pure shell is everything comes from Nix packages that is declared in the Nix shell file. Just to be sure everyone understands.
You can tell it to have a pure shell, but the --pure argument for Nix shell just kind of clears environment variables before you enter into the shell. And that doesn't take care of all the purities, unfortunately. So like, I mean, the network is obviously a big impurity. You can still access arbitrary file paths. So yeah, --pure wouldn't take care of like shared libraries in some paths. But yeah, a --pure shell is better than nothing.
We have a question from Thor, who has an issue with their printer with NixOS. It works with Fedora. I don't have an answer here, but I suppose Fedora may come with more drivers you would have to declare in NixOS. Maybe also some printer service to discover printers connected on the network. The default.
Sorry, it wasn't really meant as a question. It was more as a response to Noon's question about things that don't work. So that was just my single example of something that at least I struggled with.
Yeah, but exactly what kind of issue someone can have with NixOS and could be frustrated with it.
Yeah.
So
I guess in general, it's that NixOS is only as good as the things that are well supported out of the box. And so if nobody ever took a look at the printer thing properly and wrote something nice for Nix, it just won't work very well. Someone has to kind of do that first.
I will add the template used for the NixOS workstation with a graphical interface may be a bit minimalist compared to Ubuntu or Fedora. They may come with drivers and stuff for more devices than NixOS with its graphical profile. So this may be why you have stuff not working with NixOS and working on another. Both will be using Linux, so in theory this can work on NixOS, but just a PC is missing, and you need to figure out which one.
Yeah, that's it.
So it seems we don't have any question. If we don't have any last-minute question, I would like to thank everyone who assists. Thanks, Sylvain, for bringing more explanation. You have a deeper understanding with Nix than me, so it's welcome. And I will stop the recording now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. See you.